Now that.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Hope everybody is doing well. We've got a fun show today, as I've talked about a little bit earlier in the year and some of the preview shows. One of the things I've been wanting to do is really kind of dive in, not just to AI, because we're going to talk about that in a lot of shows, but really pick out some interesting applications, some interesting use cases, and really kind of dive into where does AI start and stop? Where does the human interaction start and stop? And so, really excited to have with us today Tim Huckaby, who is CTO at Lucihub, excuse me. Tim, welcome to the show. Great to have you on.
Hey, fun to be here. Thank you, Brian.
I'm excited to dive in. You and I have been talking a lot even before we started recording about other stuff.
Shouldn't we be recording this?
No, you have a personality that I'm excited to dig into. Before we dive into AI and all this stuff, give us a little bit of your background, because you've got a very fascinating background that we probably could go on for a couple of hours. But give us a little bit of background, and then ultimately how you got into this space.
Yeah. I've been lucky, and I have a big background because I'm old.
Join the club.
Well, I think I got a few years on you. I worked on the Windows NT Server Extended team at Microsoft as a young man. That would be in the late 90s. So when I was there, that famous email from Bill Gates came across, we're late to the internet, that famous thing. And that's the product I worked on, which was called NT Option Pack. It had the first IIS, Internet Information Server for non-Microsoft folks. Honestly, at Microsoft's where I learned how to build professional software. It was great learning experience. It's just interesting, though, that the people I work with then are now running the company now, this $1 trillion company.
Yeah, so that had to be the server space was where Satya came out of.
Satya had these two buddies. We worked in the same building. And he had these two or three buddies, and they were so shy, and they never went home. We were working hard. We were working 14-hour days. We were way behind the 8 ball, trying to compete with some products that are already out there in the market.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really, I just was talking about this to an old Microsoft friend the other day. Like, I didn't really know Satya until after he got the CEO job, and I wouldn't call us buddies. Being that said, Scott Guthrie is a dear friend of mine.
Okay, yeah, sure.
He joined just a couple weeks before me. He was this big, lanky kid from Duke, the super genius, built .NET over a weekend, that story. Yeah. And then, in my career, I guess because of my personality, I always got stuck with doing the demo in the big conferences.
Yeah.
So, I've been Bill Gates' demo boy. I've been Steve Ballmer's demo boy. You name it. I've been the demo boy for the executive team. And I didn't know what a big deal it was at the time. I was young and was like, oh, God, if I got to do this, I got to do this. But nowadays, people look at it like, you're kidding me. Bill Gates? I'm like, no one really knows Bill Gates. But I did do demos in his keynotes. I did the .NET launch, the ASP. I had the killer ASP.NET demo in that in the launch, and that would be Everett, which was 93.
Yeah.
2003. Sorry. 2003. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Okay. Yeah. So anyways, that was in Redmond, Washington, and I'm a Southern Californian.
Yeah.
And I was commuting by airplane.
Right. I know that life. I used to do it out for Cisco every week.
And when your kids are small, your wife really doesn't dig it, right?
No,
so I did that for a long time, almost 2 years commuted. I was only home for 32 hours a week. The kids were tiny. And, of course, the opportunity came to live up there in Redmond, Washington. And at the time, you had to live there.
Right.
Yeah. Times have changed.
Yeah, there was no work from home. There was no work remote. It was headquarters or bust. Yep.
So I said, well, sweetheart, I have an opportunity, to stay on and do this, blah, blah, blah. But we have to move to the Seattle area. And are you able to bleep the F word out of this? She basically said, no effing way am I moving. So long story short, I founded a couple software companies. One was a service-based company, one was a product-based company. and just still remaining really tight with Microsoft.
Yep.
Not that I don't know the competition. As a Microsoft RD, you got to know the competition. But staying on the platform, we built software for Microsoft. Some of the more famous software we built is that CNN Magic Wall that you see on
Okay.
TV
Oh,
all the
okay.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. We were building political software back when it was well, it's still a big deal.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So I felt you probably want the story about how I fell into AI, which I literally fell backwards into AI. I was in this meeting on campus at Microsoft.
Yep.
So, part of the MVPs or RDs or something like that. But there were only 20 of us in the room, and there was this young gal they marched in, and her name is Anna Roth, one of the most brilliant people I've ever had the pleasure to meet or work with. But I didn't know who she was. She's, some 25-year-old PM, and she did this demo on computer vision, but it was before cognitive services
Okay.
launched.
Yep.
They were under the hood for a couple of years before they launched all their products. And this is like 15 years ago, a decade to 15 years ago, when Microsoft first jumped into AI with cognitive services. And my mouth was like at some of the stuff that they had built.
Yeah.
Specifically the computer vision thing. I fell in love with it right off the bat.
Right.
So I pivoted my career because I'm, like a shiny object guy, and the bass metaphor, the shiny object. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I pivoted my career and I changed that product company towards a computer vision based suite of products, not just faces, but weapon recognition and a bunch of cool answer recognition. I've done a bunch of awesome, just really fun, save the world type stuff, but at the same time, to keep the lights on, we built software for the company that's killing the world with their cheeseburgers. So, in any event, so I've been in AI for over a decade.
Yeah.
And it was never a big deal to anybody until just recently,
I know.
with
It's
an AI thing. And yeah, that's the long version of how we cut to today. There's a little after I sold my interest in the other companies. There's there's like a year of me fly fishing the world, before I jumped in and figured out or before my wife made me go back to work.
We were going to talk about that. There was a couple of pieces in there that that really kind of grabbed my attention. The first thing I had to look up when you had mentioned that you had done demos for Bill and Steve and stuff was, I said, I got to make sure he wasn't the guy who was on stage when the blue screen of death happened. And I was like, no, it wasn't him. That's good. We won't have to do any therapy sessions today.
That wasn't me, but that guy went on to this illustrious career at Microsoft.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't his fault that Windows crashed.
Right.
It's just Bill Gates breathing down his neck made him feel like it was his fault.
Right.
Yeah, which is the distinction between like a Bill Gates keynote and a Steve Ballmer keynote. Steve Ballmer loves that shit.
Yeah.
He loves going off script and when weird stuff happens and he loves, talking to the demoers. A Bill Gates keynote, and I'm sure it's true to this day, is like filming a Hollywood movie. It's scripted.
Sure.
It's nothing comes out of your mouth that isn't planned.
Right.
There's all these Hollywood people. You've got ultra redundancy. So like when I did in the .NET launch and I'm doing my ASP.NET demo, there's someone on a similar computer doing, following keystroke.
Yep.
So if I crashed it, they would just switch and I would talk to it, right? Steve Ballmer, like he just loved winging it. I love that about him. Yeah. So the other thing was, you weren't allowed to engage Steve on stage because he wanted you to, right? He's like, don't talk to him. Whatever he says, just go. That's right, Steve. Like, don't engage him. Because then you derail, like I'm doing right now. You derail the conversation.
Sure. Yeah, he was an intense guy. I think he's maybe just a hair less intense nowadays, but he was an intense guy. Well, the other thing that you mentioned, and I'll move on. People forget back in the day, Microsoft had probably one of the world's most advanced sort of research labs. Nathan Marvold and all the folks that ran the
MSR.
big.
Yeah.
big Microsoft research. They don't get a lot of attention anymore these days because it's, things move quickly. But yeah, that was quite a thing.
So
And
on the
like you said, a
tech,
lot of stuff got hidden. It was, under the
well,
covers.
let me tell you this. It's probably not commonly known except to those of us on the engineering teams is MSR is Microsoft Research. We call it MSR. And what we used to say in the engineering teams is that's where great ideas go to die. Because some middle manager on the business side of Microsoft would say, "Oh, we can't make money on it," or something like that. Times have changed, obviously, because they've figured out how to pluck IP out of MSR or whatever it's called these days. But
Right.
back then, you know, different, much different company back then,
Yeah.
much different.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about your current company, Lucihub. I was very interested in it because like I said, I have this fascination this year. I'm trying to figure out, what are the killer apps for AI? What are people doing that are making them productive? And you guys have a very interesting approach that caught my eye, which was you help companies, build, video production, right? Could be for lots of different things.
Yeah, right.
But there's this interesting interaction. It's not just sort of the, here's a script, AI go off and create me something. There's a human element that involves producers and people that you would think of that do video. I'm curious. Walk me through first and foremost, what the company builds, because I'm way underselling it. But then I want to get into that. How do you guys think about where the AI starts and stops? Where do the humans and experts start and stop?
All great questions. Clearly, you've come prepared. Yeah, Lucihub, great company, great people. I'm having a hoot of fun in this company. But really, I'll do my own
Yeah.
elevator pitch because the marketing elevator pitch is, doesn't really cater to a technical audience. Essentially, we automate through software the process of professional video production.
Okay.
So, our customer probably wouldn't be a YouTube type evangelist type person, but it is Microsoft, it is Apple,
Yeah.
it is companies who make HR videos. We span all these different industries. We're a startup, but we have real customers. Being that said, the art of producing a good professional video takes humans. That
Yeah.
they just the AI can't do the creative part.
Right.
So especially at the end. So there's pre-production, there's production and post-production. On the production side, we have editors, and I believe they're staged in different time zones because one of our selling points is we can get it done so quickly. Let me give you for an example. Like a Nike commercial would take 6 weeks to produce, end to end, and it would take $250,000 to $500,000
Right.
to do. Okay, so we can do that in, I don't know, under $10,000 in 3 days.
Okay.
We could do a wedding. If this was our target market, and probably is, we could do like a wedding video and hand it to everybody before they go home from the reception.
Oh, wow.
Because and a lot of that is pure software automation.
Yeah.
And if you're the engineers in your audience, you're thinking like, well, I get how that happens. What is super interesting is pre-production, and that is script, storyboards, shot list, things like that. Things that they would do like for a Hollywood movie,
Right.
which
Sure.
could be done in our software and is being done in our software. The Hollywood or the movie industry is going to this,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, because who knew, but it has such an awesome.
Right. And for those just listening on audio, he's just holding up his iPhone, and people are now shooting really high quality stuff on iPhone.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. No problem.
I have a fancy overpriced iPhone, but it takes great video.
Yeah.
So my point is, historically, that pre-production process, developing the script,
Yep.
things like that, takes a lot of creative people a lot of time. Well, if you know what generative AI does, we've built an LLM wrapper. We can swap out the LLM on the back end.
Yep.
But typically, GPT through Azure OpenAI gives us really great content. Being that said, not only is Microsoft guardrailing it because it's in
Yep.
Azure OpenAI,
Yep.
but the actual engineering in the system that does the prompting
Mm-hmm.
is elaborate. It's
Sure.
sophisticated. We use semantic kernel, which is this open source group of bits that kind of orchestrates it.
Right.
But my mantra to this particular dev team was always, if Grandma Huckaby could sit in front of this piece of software and use it effectively to create a script and a shot list and storyboards and all that other stuff that goes in professional video, then we've done a good job. And we have. I got to say, we've just done a brilliant job. You would never tell that in a million years that's front-ending GPT. It's just a beautiful application.
Yeah.
And it produces quality content, and Hollywood people love it, and blah, blah, blah. And of course, it allows them to edit. It allows the creatives to get this super head start. They don't start from scratch. They start from us. And if they want to edit, they can. And if you want to do a voiceover, you talk to the computer, and it does it in 200 languages or whatever it does it in. There's some post-production stuff too, but really this is all about software automation and then using an LLM for more than, asking what the meaning of life is, for using it in a very specific way for a specific type of topic.
Right. And that's kind of what drew my interest, because I, having been part of product teams and marketing organizations, like I've had to do these types of things before. We could be building a video for a trade show, we could be building something specific for a customer, whatever it would be. But that process, like you said, was come up with a script, work with a bunch of human editors on the other side, think through all the different screenshots. Then 2 weeks later, you'd get back a few pictures and you'd go, well, I like this. And it was, like you said, it was a long process. And this was for a 1 minute video, a 3 minute video. Yeah. And, maybe we were only spending $10,000 or $15,000, but just the amount of time, the amount of, iterations and so forth. And I saw what you guys did, and I really loved where it was like, you tell us sort of what you want, but it's like you said, it felt very, it allowed the human to focus on storytelling. Because it was so fast, you could do this iterative thing so quickly. And that was the part that really kind of grabbed my attention, because I thought these guys they've lived with the sort of the previous generation and the problems of it. And they've figured out, where do I apply Gen AI to go fast, to iterate, to do that part was really interesting. I'm curious, did the folks who built this come from sort of video production, or how did the use case kind of flesh out of, how did that get connected?
I call those people Hollywood people.
Yeah, sure.
I've just always been a software guy. And the answer is yes. Another great question. Yeah, we have Hollywood people in the company.
Okay.
And they drive requirements along with customers, of course, but
sure.
Programmers aren't building this type of thing.
Right.
It's just some of the stuff they come up with, I'm like, oh, wow, God, I never thought of that, type stuff, because it is in an industry that I have very little experience. I have tons of experience in software architecture and AI, but it's kind of insignificant to the creative part of a professional video. The other thing that occurs to me is how interactive the software is. So, the customer may have 20 people involved in the project, and they're interacting through our software platform, going back and forth from our editors. They're not talking to AI, they're talking to real people. Change that to this, and I've got a new piece of content, and and we've got a bunch of high tech stuff in the background, fast storage, and all that type of stuff you would expect. But yeah, I mean, it's so far so good.
Right.
You know what I mean? We got happy customer. We're a tiny company looking for funding, but we may make it on revenue, pure revenue.
Right.
It's been a hoot of fun.
And how did I'm curious, because we're going to have folks who are, product managers and building and things. How do they figure out what the right interaction is between, where your editors, your people interact with this thing, and then not your customer, but like the people, Lucihub people, and where the technology is interaction? Like, is it a lot of iteration, a lot of trial and error, or do you find it's, like you said, the Hollywood people kind of build them out, this is what the model should should look like in their words, and then the technologists kind of figure it out. How is that kind of working out?
Well, I don't know if I'm totally answering your question directly, but the Hollywood people, the people who are really savvy to
Yeah.
professional video production in the company, Mark and Allie and these folks, you know, they've done this for so long, they know where the bottlenecks are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I sit in these requirements meetings. There was one yesterday, and I'm like, holy cow, what a great idea. It never even occurred to me. And then that ends up saving up time. Another one, which you probably know, Brian, the Adobe Premiere is a big time suck. And
Yeah.
it's a huge giant, which is the software that typically a company uses to make the actual video,
Yeah.
to piece it together. So we got our hooks into that, so that those people's lives are a lot better too.
Okay.
We can create a Premiere project from what we have,
Uh-huh.
lay out the timeline, all that stuff that takes so long, and eventually, we might have AI lay that out,
Yep.
but I don't know.
Yeah. Now, well, and that's an interesting aspect, because there's times when somebody will build something and they'll go, well, in order to get the greatness of what I do, you got to start over. You got to stop doing whatever you do. And sometimes that works, but far too often people go, well, but I've got processes in place. I've got tools in place. Like you said, I've got a set of Adobe tools. It's smart to be able to go, I can jump in the middle of that and augment it. I can simplify it. I can reduce it. That to me is always an interesting mindset, to sort of be like, some people only have the mindset of it's only my way or the highway. You guys have taken an approach of like, I also got to fit in where people live every day.
And you make a good point, because, the resistance, every business has resistance, but
Sure.
the resistance from potential customers that we get are the ones that just can't put two and two together, that this is just a tool. It's not replacing you.
Yeah.
This is going to allow you to go 20 times faster for a fraction of what you're spending right now.
Right.
So the resistance we get is from that expert in Adobe Illustrator who knows more than everyone else in their company.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, I hate this thing. But the ones who are owning the budget love it, right? Because ultimately,
Sure.
it's more inexpensive. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's probably interesting to figure out, like, if they were used to it taking, let's say, 6 weeks to build out a project, or to get from idea to execution, like there's the flip side of that, which is like, yes, it's cheaper, but also, could we be doing more of these videos? Like, are these, could we be doing this in other aspects of the business? Would that make more sense? It'd be
Most of, like, our what do you call the HR video things? Those compliance videos things?
Sure. Yeah.
That typically is a good customer, because it takes them so long to produce these things. So much money. And they're like, you're kidding me. They bang out, 10 videos in 2 weeks. They're all professionally done.
right.
Yeah. It's good stuff. But with all the good, right? Nothing's ever perfect. And if
Sure.
you use generative AI, if you want to go, so what's the bad news, Tim? The bad news is generative AI, and you know what I always loved about software, and you do have a little gray hair there, Brian, is that in software, because it's ones and zeros, it either works or it doesn't, historically.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's why I always hated hardware, because sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
Well, we've got this black box Gen AI thing, whether it be GPT or the French one, Mistral, or the new Chinese one over the weekend. It doesn't matter. 1 out of every 10 answers is just flat out wrong.
Yeah.
And I just don't get that. I don't understand how that happens.
That's
It's got to be some type of randomization out there that produces that.
Yeah, that I find that anybody who has like a database background, or any, a data background, that idea of like, no, you ask the question, you're supposed to get one set of answers. What do you mean you're going to give me
the exact same
two and a half?
Yeah. So, we had to build, not only do we have to build fault tolerance, but we have to build, an iterative way to if the creative gets, let's say it's a script.
Yeah.
Gets the script back, and it's like, oh my God, that has nothing to do with what I want this video about. I asked for a video on fly fishing for trout in Western North Carolina, and I got back,
Yeah, polar
What's
bears
in McDonald's,
that's right.
right? So
Yeah,
it happens. So you
sure.
know, we have to be really savvy in user interaction design. That if that does happen, you get to try again, and that's what I kind of referred to it. We don't really, we're still struggling with the implementation, to tell you the truth. But ultimately, if you don't like it, you should be able to send it to a different LLM, whether it be on
Sure.
the GPT side or Mistral or the new Chinese
Yeah.
one or the
Yeah.
Google one or the Facebook one or whatever. You should be able to do that. But then you cross the threshold of now you've gone from super easy from Grandma Huckaby to use to, oh, you got to know a little bit about generative AI to make that type of choice. So
Right.
it's tricky.
Right.
I could tell you. Can I tell you a great story about a developer mistake the other day?
Sure. Sure. Sure.
If you have developers that are listening to this, and I know you do, the thing about AI, when you're calling AI services,
Yep.
whether it be in AWS or whoever,
Right.
or Azure, a developer can make a mistake, and before you blink, it could cost thousands of dollars.
Oh yeah. 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 No, we've heard those stories
And
before.
let me give you a great. This has happened twice to me in my career, but the recent one is um, the developer, who's a brilliant guy. His name Marquise Howard, and he built a lot of our pre-production software. But his retry logic was not robust enough for how bad the API is for Dolly on the
Okay.
Azure OpenAI side. It's
Yep.
terrible.
Yep.
That thing times out constantly.
Okay.
While Microsoft's problem is it's got to keep pace with
Yeah,
OpenAI.
all this demand. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And at the same time, they have to guardrail it because it's enterprise. So they're adding features to it to contain the monster. And just the Dolly implementation has been awful, and we need to generate storyboards and images and stuff
Yep.
like that.
Yep.
Right. Well, his code was calling the retrying on a failed API, at the millisecond level.
Yeah.
And Microsoft's licensing basically says if you call the API, you pay for it, whether it works or not.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
$40,000 later before I'm like, what the hell's going on over here?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, great story. They ultimately they credited us.
Sure.
After
Yeah.
I pleaded my case through normal channels. I didn't pull
Oh,
any.
right. Right. Well, I think what you,
and go, oh,
yeah.
us. Yeah.
Well, I think I mean, that piece, even, I've mentioned it before, people learned some of those lessons in cloud when they first started, but it took them multiple years, right?
Yeah.
I'm hoping people, as they're building their AI stuff, have put the sort of financial, at least visibility up front, so they know that, yeah, you could have a bad day and you're $7,000 in the hole, or $15,000, $20,000, $40,000 in the hole without even knowing it. Whereas
Right.
you
Right.
need something flashing a red light at you, going like, are you sure this is what you wanted to spend?
And it's funny you say that, because your audience may be saying, well, why didn't you put, Azure has those throttles and those
Right.
alerts and stuff like that. Why didn't you do that? Why didn't you
Right.
instrument it so you got visibility? Well, we're in that Microsoft Startups for Founders program,
Yeah,
Founders Hubry, whatever they call
Yeah.
it. And so we're on a free Azure dime right now. And if
Yeah.
you're free in Azure, you don't get
Forget
any.
about it.
You,
Oh, okay. I got you.
don't
Yeah.
get any of those features because
Yeah.
you're free. You're not consuming anything. So they built this, half-assed tool that allows you retroactively to look, which is ultimately the way I found out.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
that's way after it happened.
Right.
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 Yeah.
No,
Interesting. And they'll fix that, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, you're highlighting. I like the discussion, because you're highlighting both the valuable things you're creating at this sort of intersection of humans and AI, and domain expertise and all that stuff, and at the same time you're giving me some reality of, if I just read the headlines, 2 years from now AI's taking over everything, cancer's cured, all these sort of things. And
Yeah.
then there's the, oh yeah, but if you do it wrong, you may get a huge bill because you didn't do a retry correctly, or so it's technology. There's still a lot to work through, and I appreciate the honesty on it.
Well, I'm totally a good news, bad news type of guy. And that's what that is.
Yeah.
Here's the good news. We built this beautiful application and the world loves it. The bad news is every 100 times, it's not so good.
completely wrong. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
Just
and that's got to be an interesting thing for your editors because even if you're watching a 3-minute film, which you think like, oh, there's not that much, you get a 6-fingered person in there, or you get a thing that's just completely wrong.
or someone, see, that's kind of interesting you say that, because a lot of the guardrails, at least what's supposed to be happening on the image generation side, on the Dolly
Yep.
side, would be if generative AI generated someone, doing the Nazi salute,
Yeah.
Microsoft would catch it, not OpenAI. Microsoft would catch that and, cull it from the answer.
Yeah.
And you can imagine how difficult that is.
Oh, sure.
Being that said, the video API they have, the video analysis API, the new one they have, where you literally can ask it anything about a video that you've never seen. Take me to the part where if anyone gets hurt,
Yeah.
just generically hurt, it understands what hurt is, or an accident. It understands
Right.
it. I use the wedding metaphor a lot. Like, take me to the part with the mean grandma. As
Yeah.
long as you define who the mean grandma is, who you put in the back of the room,
Yeah.
it can learn that stuff quite easily. Which, if you think about video production, if you've got a gazillion clips, and the reason it takes so long in Adobe Premiere, if you've got a gazillion clips of video content and you've got to trim that down to a 3-minute video,
Yeah.
that is difficult. That's
Oh,
where
yeah.
AI can definitely help. In a
Yeah,
wedding
yeah, yeah.
metaphor, it would be, and we have all these customized pipelines for each industry, but in a wedding use case, it would be like, the bride and groom have to be in 60% of the video, at least.
Right. Yeah.
The mean grandma has to be minimized to 2. We want at least 30 seconds of the cake cutting. What else happens? The dancing.
Yeah.
We need 5% of it to be the dancing. We don't want any content where the sister and the brother were pulling each other's hair in the background.
All those things. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's where AI can help a lot too, but that still requires creative people to look at it. You can't just accept AI for what it produces. Generative.
Right.
That's another big understanding. My most of my background is in computer vision, not in generative AI.
Right. Yeah.
Generative AI
more.
to me is still new. It's still this
Wild
west, this
Yeah.
space race, this frontier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it is fascinating, especially to talk to folks who have been around, I'll call it like traditional AI, predictive AI, machine for 10, 15, 20 years. And the stories they tell are fantastic. And then the new generation that's sort of dealing with Gen AI speaks so confidently. And at the same time, you sort of want to go, you haven't been around it. Nobody's been around it enough to sort of know where it makes mistakes. You're just, right now, you're sort of fascinated with the frosting part of it. You haven't gotten into the baking of the cake part of it. You haven't gotten into all those things, which we all have a lot to learn there.
Yeah.
Well, we've been talking about a lot of this stuff. I'll if you are somebody who is has a need, or if your team has a need, I'm going to recommend go take a look at this. I want to ask you one last question, because you and I were talking about fly fishing, which is sort of your other passion with technology.
There you go. Yeah.
Do you find, so fly fishing is a very nature engrossing thing, right? You are out amongst nature. You are like, do you find that helps you balance between the ones and zeros of technology, or do you find it opens up some new way of thinking that helps you on the technology side?
Well, some people, another great question. Some people, step away from a problem in software to get, some type of silence where they can think things through. That standing in a river in the mountains for me is the only place where I can kind of think clearly. But fly fishing, not only is it physical, not only is it athletic, not only are you in the middle of the wilderness where there isn't a cell phone signal, you have to also understand the science and the biology.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what the fish is eating. You got to figure that out by the bugs that are hatching, right?
Yeah.
So I also say it's truly the only place where I don't think about software. It's my respite, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I love it, and I hope that there are some how do I say this? AI has the potential, some parts of AI have the potential to ruin something like fly fishing.
Yeah, sure.
Like if you invented the fly, which is, a mayfly or a caddisfly, whatever, and it's on a hook. And if you invented an AI thing and it was cost effective that was the fly and it looked and acted like the bug,
Yeah.
you freaking slay. And if your AI drone went out and looked in the river and saw what was hatching and saw what they're eating, you
Right.
would freaking slay. And that's what I don't want. It's the other place that hasn't been automated.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
entire
Yeah.
world does, in my opinion, the entire world doesn't need to be automated. There are places that should be untouched.
Yep. Yep.
Being that said, we use tech, we, meaning humanity, use tech for a lot of
Right. Right.
things we shouldn't, a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's going to be an interesting, I don't know, whether it be a transition or a coexistence, it's going to be an interesting next few years to see, how well people adapt to this stuff. But
And I get asked this question all the time, as I imagine you do. And my answer always is, I think it'll be really interesting and somewhat annoying for us, for me.
yeah. Yeah.
But for our kids, it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah. No, I think about that a lot. Yeah. How are they going to adapt to, the things that I don't want to say we took them for granted, but they were there for us to experience, and they may not have those, whether they're human to human interactions or, having to think through hard problems or whatever those things might be. Well, listen, Tim, you are a busy man. You guys are running a fast moving company. I want to be conscious of your time. I appreciate the conversation. I was hoping that we would dive into stuff. We went in a bunch of different directions. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What's the best way if somebody wants to engage with the Lucihub team? They've got a project. They want to see what's the best way to engage with your team?
Well, feel free to engage me directly.
Okay.
I love talking about this stuff, clearly. And you can track me down with an internet search or just go to timhuckaby.com. But the company's website is lucihub.com.
Yep. Okay.
Lucihub. Luci from the Latin light.
Okay.
Luci.
Very cool.
So yeah, that's how to track me or the company. Feel free.
Good deal. We will get that in the show notes, folks. You can find it and click on it. But yeah, cool stuff. Thank you for the stories. Thank you for the insight into how this stuff's being built. And it's fun to see, again, how the evolution of these things happen. So thank you again, folks. With that, I'm going to wrap it up. I want to thank Tim for his time and his expertise. And for Aaron and myself, hope you all are doing well. If you have any questions, again, show@thecloudcast.net. And we will talk to you next week.
Cool. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.